It was the end of the monsoon season in a small village surrounded by dense forests and misty hills, and although the rain had stopped, the earth still smelled wet and the nights had grown strangely silent. And in that village lived a young man named Arjun who had recently returned from the city after years of studying. But the villagers noticed that something about the forest near the old hill had changed because people had begun whispering about a Chhalava, a mysterious spirit known for deceiving travelers and luring them into darkness, and Arjun, being educated and skeptical, laughed whenever he heard these stories, saying, "These are just superstitions. Spirits don't exist." But his grandmother, who had lived in that village her whole life, would shake her head slowly and reply in a trembling voice, "Beta, the forest has its own secrets. Not everything can be explained with books." Yet Arjun ignored her warnings until one evening when the sun was fading behind the hills and a golden mist covered the narrow road that passed through the forest. Arjun decided to walk there to clear his mind, and as he stepped onto the lonely path he heard the faint sound of someone calling his name. "Arjun! Arjun!" And he stopped suddenly and looked around but saw no one. The tall trees swayed slightly and the air felt unusually cold. "Who's there?" he called out loudly, but only silence answered him, and he muttered under his breath, "Probably just the wind," before continuing deeper into the forest. Yet the voice returned again, softer but clearer this time. "Arjun, wait for me." And this time it sounded like the voice of his childhood friend Ravi, who had died in an accident years ago. Arjun froze and whispered, "No, that's impossible." But curiosity slowly overcame his fear and he walked toward the direction of the voice, pushing aside branches and stepping over roots until he reached a small clearing where the fog seemed thicker than anywhere else. And suddenly he saw a figure standing under a crooked tree, a silhouette that looked exactly like Ravi, wearing the same shirt he used to wear years ago. Arjun's heart began pounding as he stepped closer and said slowly, "Ravi, is that really you?" And the figure smiled faintly and replied, "Yes, Arjun, don't you recognize me?" And Arjun's mind raced with confusion because the voice sounded real and the face looked familiar. Yet something about the eyes seemed hollow and lifeless, and he asked nervously, "But you died years ago, how can you be here?" And the figure tilted its head strangely and answered, "Death doesn't end everything, my friend, some of us remain." And at that moment the wind began to howl softly through the trees and Arjun felt an uncomfortable chill crawl down his spine. Yet he forced himself to laugh and said, "This must be some trick, someone is playing with me." But the figure suddenly stepped closer and its smile widened unnaturally as it whispered, "You came here because I called you just like everyone else." And Arjun frowned and asked, "Everyone else? What do you mean?" And the figure raised its arms slowly and pointed deeper into the forest where the fog shifted briefly, revealing faint shapes lying on the ground as if people had collapsed there. And Arjun stepped back in horror and stammered, What happened to them?" And the figure's voice changed, becoming deeper and distorted as it replied, "They followed the voices they trusted, and the forest kept them." And suddenly Arjun remembered the village rumors about the Chhalava, the spirit that copied voices and faces to trap humans, and fear finally filled his chest as he whispered, "You're not Ravi, you're the Chhalava." And the creature laughed softly, a hollow echoing sound that seemed to come from every direction. "Clever boy, but realization comes too late for most." And Arjun began slowly backing away while saying, "Stay away from me." But the creature's shape began shifting strangely as its face twisted and its limbs stretched unnaturally, its eyes glowing faintly in the mist, and it spoke again in multiple overlapping voices. "Why are you afraid, Arjun? Didn't you come to meet your friend?" And Arjun turned suddenly and started running through the forest path, branches slapping against his face and roots nearly tripping him as he heard the creature's laughter chasing him through the fog. And every few seconds the voice of someone he loved echoed around him, sometimes his grandmother calling, "Arjun, beta, come here." Sometimes Ravi shouting, "Wait for me." and sometimes even his own voice whispering, "Don't run, it's safe here." And Arjun covered his ears and shouted desperately, "Stop it! Leave me alone!" But the voices only grew louder and closer, and suddenly he stumbled onto a rocky slope and fell hard onto the ground. And when he looked up, he saw the creature standing only a few feet away, its body flickering between different faces, Ravi, his grandmother, strangers from the village, until finally it settled on Arjun's own face, smiling back at him with cruel amusement, and it spoke slowly in Arjun's exact voice. "You see, humans trust what they recognize." And Arjun's breathing became heavy as he struggled to stand and said weakly, "Why are you doing this?" And the Chhalava replied calmly, "I don't hunt. I simply guide." Humans walk willingly into their own darkness, and it extended its hand toward him and whispered, "Come with me, Arjun, the forest is peaceful, no pain, no fear." But Arjun remembered his grandmother's words about the forest having secrets and suddenly realized something important, that the Chhalava could only deceive the mind but not control the will. So he closed his eyes tightly and said to himself, "None of this is real, it's just an illusion." And when he opened them again, he refused to look at the creature's face and instead focused on the path behind him, slowly stepping backward while saying firmly, "You can copy voices, but you can't copy the truth." And the Chhalava's expression darkened as it hissed angrily, "You think you can escape?" And the fog around them thickened violently as dozens of voices screamed at once. But Arjun turned and ran again with all his strength toward the faint lights of the village visible through the trees. And after what felt like hours, he finally burst out of the forest onto the muddy road where the lanterns of the village flickered warmly, and he collapsed breathlessly near the well just as a few villagers rushed toward him asking, "Arjun, what happened? Why were you in the forest?" And he looked back at the dark tree line trembling as he whispered, "The Chhalava, it's real." But the villagers exchanged uneasy glances because they had heard that warning many times before. And that night when Arjun told his grandmother everything, she simply sighed and said quietly, "You are lucky, Beta. Most people who hear the Chhalava's voice never return." And as Arjun lay awake in bed later that night staring at the ceiling, he tried convincing himself it was all a nightmare. Yet just as sleep began to take him, he heard a faint whisper near his window, soft and familiar, sounding exactly like his own voice saying, "Arjun, I'm still waiting in the forest, come back." And his eyes snapped open in terror as the wind outside rustled the trees, and somewhere far beyond the village the forest echoed with a quiet, patient laughter.